possess a state-issued photo identification and to request the Hamilton County Legislative Delegation to initiate steps in the 107th Tennessee General Assembly to repeal said act.
This resolution was heard at the committee as a whole. Dr. Mackey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I was one of the sponsors of this resolution, and there was some conversation last week in commission meeting relative to this issue, and it seemed the sentiment was going to be to not support it. I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if it's possible to structure this in a way, at least say people who are 55 and older, maybe the legislature in Nashville, we could suggest to them that people 55 and older be exempt from this photo ID. As it was mentioned last week, Mr. Chairman, that there are so many elderly people in our community who don't drive anymore, and they don't need photo IDs in that way. And I understand, Mr. Chairman, that yeah, we do want to protect the sacred ballot against fraud, but again, I'll just ask that question: when was the last time that we in Hamilton County heard of anyone trying to vote illegally? Are we going to put up a hurdle that's going to inhibit the right of elderly people to vote simply because of the threat that somebody may violate the ballot? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Beck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Mackey because we probably need to ask that they amend this law or rescind it, either one. I threw out some figures last week that said that we are wondering why so much resources were put into ensuring another country overseas would have the right to vote, and then they would come home and find that their grandparents would have problems going to the poll here to vote after we had expended so many resources and human resources and money in Iraq to ensure their rights, to create rights for them. I threw out the figure of billions of dollars. The report that I got, it is $700 billion has been spent so far on that war in Iraq. And this 12-page report from the UN on their structure of the voting situation down in Iraq says elections, and this is just one part, elections have the potential to contribute to the restoration of peace and stability in Iraq, excuse me, as well as conveying legitimacy on the new transitional government. It is crucial for the legitimacy and success of the constitutional exercise of the National Assembly to represent a broad and diverse cross-section of Iraqi society as possible. The electoral process must therefore seek to gain the greatest inclusiveness and transparency. The greatest inclusiveness and transparency as possible, offering the widest opportunity for Iraqis to participate as voters and candidates. And so we're trying to really ensure that other people have that ability. And we come home and we have this kind of infringement on our right to vote here in Hamilton County and this nation. Somebody said that this was this administration's effort to have some scare tactics going on to raise money across the nation. That could not be further from the truth. Disenfranchisement is a very serious thing. We shouldn't put any obstacles in the way of our citizens, especially those who pay tax here in Hamilton County. So I would ask if this commission wants to restructure this resolution to ask that it be amended, then I would, if this body would entertain that as a motion.
Commissioner Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I respectfully disagree with both of my colleagues. I won't support this in any shape or fashion. I believe that the people that are fighting for our freedoms and have been fighting for our freedoms for well over 200 years, if we take lightly one voter fraud, one vote, then we're doing a disservice to all of our community. So I will, me personally, I won't support this in any way, shape, or fashion, and I applaud our state delegates for working so diligently to put this law on the books. Thank you.
Mr. Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may quote just briefly here, I think it's good for the public and this commission to hear what former President Jimmy Carter stated on this subject. Former President Jimmy Carter stated on March 22nd, 2006, within the next 3 or 4 years, all 50 states will move to some kind of voter ID. President Carter, along with former Secretary of State James Baker, recently led the Commission on Federal Election Reform. Among the Commission's recommendations was the requirement of photographic identification at the polls in order to curb voter fraud. Everyone in this room greatly respects former President Jimmy Carter's efforts in the process of democratic and freedom of vote, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. And he is certainly the ambassador for the right for each and every one of us to vote and be assured that our vote is counted without any fraud and distrust at the polls. So with that said, I would certainly be opposed to any kind of resolution that would set back the state legislature's decision to have voter ID in the state of Tennessee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bay?
Mr. Chairman, I think that we're not saying that we shouldn't ensure that legitimacy at the polls is intact. We're saying that we have 7,000 citizens right now who have not been able to meet those requirements. And a lot of those citizens are taxpayers, voters, who have voted and supported this county in the past, and we're not saying that we're saying that we're sensitive to their plight. This is what we're saying. We're sensitive to what's going on with our people right here. Okay, so amend or rescind is what I would favor at this time. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, anytime you have a situation like this where this county can step forward and show sensitivity to its own citizens, I think it would behoove all of us to move in that direction. Now, you can't make anybody move in that direction, but morally speaking, I think people who have that kind of fiber about them will move in that direction to ensure that we're not going to be opposed to legitimacy, but if anybody is guilty of voter fraud, or we find that in our own situation here, somebody's head ought to roll. It's just as simple as that. So we still support amend or rescind.
Mr. Fields?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a motion before the?
We don't have one
Thank you.
yet.
Offer motion that we approve.
Dr. Mackey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, all of us, we've read that there was a story in a book, and it made reference to how this one person had 100 talents, and they were able to recover one, and they celebrated that. And the moral is, in reference to the potential of fraud, putting up barriers for the many, it just simply seems to go against principles and everything else. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Thank you.
We have a motion by Commissioner Beck for resolution 121114. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Mackey. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no lights, Mr. Clerk, we have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Bankston,
No.
Commissioner Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
No.
Commissioner Fields,
No.
Commissioner Graham,
No.
Commissioner Mackey,
Yes.
Commissioner McClure,
No.
Commissioner Skiller,
No.
Mr. Chairman.
No. Resolution 121114 fails. Resolution 121115 has been pulled.